The darkness was absolute. No sliver of light, no echo of life. Just the sound of slow breathing, her own, bouncing off the damp stone walls. Ilara had learned to measure time by the distant toll of bells and the faint scurry of mice. She wasn't sure how many days had passed, only that they kept passing and she was still here. The air in the cellar was thick with mildew and forgotten memories. Chains once bound to the walls clanked softly when the wind pressed against the cracks in the manor's old bones. Above her, life moved on. Below, she existed. Her fingers traced the uneven surface of her left cheek, where the skin was puckered and raised. The fire had spared her life but left her marked. Her parents called them a curse, said they would bring ruin. Said no one could ever see her like this. God spared you, but men won't be so kind, her mother had whispered the day they locked the cellar door. And so Ilara remained, hidden from eyes that might judge or worse, pity. Yet even in the shadows, she remembered colour. The golden fields in spring, the deep reds of the autumn trees, her brother's laugh before the fire. She held tight to those fragments like lifelines. She didn't cry anymore. There was no point. Tears had dried up long ago, replaced by a quiet defiance that smouldered just beneath her ribs. If the world above wanted to forget her, so be it. She wouldn't forget herself. Voices sometimes drifted through the cracks, servants whispering, guards shifting at night. Once she'd heard her name. Just once. "Ilara!" The voice had been small, frightened, maybe a servant girl. But before she could answer, the voice vanished into hurried footsteps and a door slamming shut. Still, hope had stirred. Weak, flickering, but alive. On the coldest nights, she'd press her palm to the stone wall and imagine it was warm skin. That someone might be there on the other side. That someone might care. A distant bell rang. 3 chimes. Midday. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, counting backward from 10. Her body, though frail, remained strong enough for ritual. 10 steps forward, touch the wall. 10 steps back, touch the chain post. She did this over and over, her only form of control. Then she heard it again. This time, not a voice, a name. "The Alpha King has returned." Ilara froze. The words were muffled, drifting from the hall above like smoke. "They say he's searching for someone," another voice said. "Someone chosen." Her heart thudded, unfamiliar with excitement. She didn't know why those words stuck in her chest, but they did. The Alpha King. Chosen. She leaned toward the sound, breath shallow, the weight of those words settling over her like a cloak. If you've ever felt like the world has locked you away, like your pain makes you unworthy, stay with me. Because this story isn't just about chains and scars. It's about breaking them. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will hear your name too. Ilara woke to the distant creak of wooden steps. It wasn't the usual rhythm of the old house settling. Someone was walking overhead, slow, deliberate. Her ears strained in the silence, trying to make out words, but only fragments reached her through the thick stone ceiling. She's still alive. A pause. She's cursed, best forgotten. Familiar voices. Her father's, cold and sharp like broken glass. Her mother's, soft but always coated with fear. They never spoke to her directly anymore, not since the cellar door had been locked from the outside. To them she had become a problem stored away, a shameful secret hidden beneath noble flaws and polished appearances. Ilara sat up on the straw mat that served as her bed. Her back ached, muscles stiff from the chill. She pressed a hand to her chest, grounding herself. This wasn't new. The whispers came and went like wind through cracks. But today something felt different. Later, a voice she didn't recognize murmured near the cellar door, a man's voice, low and hushed. "They say the Alpha King rides with a black wolf as large as a horse." "Don't be stupid," another man whispered. "It's just stories." "Stories don't make the birds stop singing," the first replied, "and they don't send tremors through the trees." Ilara's pulse quickened. Alpha King. The name sent a shiver across her skin. She didn't know much of the outside world anymore, but tales of the wolves were carved deep into her childhood. They ruled the forests in the north, kept to their own, and were never to be crossed. The Alpha King was said to be born once in a generation, part man, part beast, all power. And now he was here? She inched closer to the wall, resting her head against the stone. Cold seeped into her bones, but she didn't move. "He's looking for someone," one of the men said. "Someone chosen," the other added. Chosen. The word stirred something strange inside her, something wild and ancient. But no, it couldn't mean her, not Ilara, not the girl with the ruined face and broken family. Still, the idea refused to leave. She touched her scars again, her fingers trembling this time. Her reflection had long since faded from memory, but she remembered the way people looked at her before she was locked away, like she was cursed, marked. The fire that stole her face had also taken her freedom, but it hadn't taken her will. She stood, her bare feet silent against the stone floor. She paced like she always did, but this time her movements were restless, fueled by something close to hope. If the Alpha King truly sought someone forgotten, hidden, scarred, then perhaps fate wasn't finished with her after all. Above, the footsteps faded, the whisperers moved on, but their words clung to the air like smoke. Alpha King, chosen, power. Ilara sat again, pulling her knees to her chest. The cellar was still the same, cold, lonely, forgotten, but her heart was no longer quiet. It beat with the rhythm of a question she didn't dare speak aloud. What if they were wrong about her? What if her scars weren't a curse, but a sign? She closed her eyes and listened, not to the silence, but to what might be coming. The cellar had grown colder. October's breath crept through the cracks, curling around Ilara's ankles like smoke. She wrapped herself tighter in the thin wool blanket, trying to chase away the chill, but nothing warmed the bones after so many seasons beneath stone. Above, the sounds of life grew louder. Boots on floorboards, doors swinging open, bursts of laughter. Too many voices for a regular day. Something was happening. "Ilara," she whispered to herself, as she often did to break the silence. "It's the festival, isn't it?" She closed her eyes and listened more closely. Music, not just any tune, but the rhythm of drums and flutes rising in spirals. Joy spilled down the walls like distant thunder. The Blood Moon Festival. She remembered it. How the village would light torches along the winding road to the central square. How masked dancers twirled beneath the red moon, celebrating the ancient ties between wolves and the earth. For most, it was tradition. For some, it was awakening. The wolves. They always came during the festival, cloaked in human skin but wild underneath. Ilara had watched from behind her family's manor windows as a child, her face pressed to the glass, enchanted by their presence. One year, a wolf had looked up at her window, straight into her eyes. She still remembered the way her heart had stopped. Now, there were no windows, just damp walls and distant echoes. But her mind painted it all again, the fires, the singing, the howls rising with the moon. "They say the blood moon can call your truth forward," she murmured. Her fingers brushed her scars. Were they truth, punishment, or a mark of something deeper? A thud above her head snapped her back. Footsteps raced past. A servant's voice rang out, breathless. "He's here!" The excitement in the girl's tone cut through the stone like lightning. "Ilara, did you hear that?" she said softly, then caught herself, blinking into the dark. There was no one here, only stone. Still, her heart responded, thudding in rhythm with the distant drums. She stood, not because she expected freedom, but because something in her blood stirred. A restlessness, a pull. She walked the cellar from end to end, pressing her hand against the bricks. She found the one loose stone in the corner, where years of scratching had carved a shallow hollow. Inside it, she kept small treasures, a pebble shaped like a heart, a broken comb, a dried flower from long ago. She touched each gently, then pulled out the flower. It had once been red, now it was brown and crumbling. But she brought it to her nose anyway, remembering its scent. "You'll see it again," she whispered to herself. "Someday." Then, clear as day, A howl pierced the night. Long, low, powerful. Ilara froze, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the howl of a common wolf. This one was different, older, deeper, resonating with something primal within her chest. More followed. The drums above stopped. Voices hushed. The earth seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha King had arrived, and Ilara, locked beneath stone and shame, felt something awaken inside her. A whisper, not from the walls, but from within. He's not just looking for a queen. He's looking for someone forgotten. And for the first time in years, she dared to wonder, what if he was looking for her? The manor had never known such silence, not the kind born of peace but of fear, thick, pressing, almost reverent. Even the servants' usual whispers had vanished. Outside, the air was taut, as though the sky itself waited. Ilara sat perfectly still, eyes wide in the dark. Her breath was shallow, ears straining. Then, like thunder, the front doors above burst open. Boots struck stone, firm, rhythmic, deliberate. A presence moved through the halls, heavy as winter, swift as wind. She didn't need to see him to know. She could feel it in her bones. The Alpha King had entered her home. "Do not look him in the eyes," came a voice, her mother's barely audible. "Let him speak and leave," her father replied. The sounds grew closer, a deep, steady breath. Cloth rustling, another set of steps, lighter, slower. A companion, perhaps. A scout. "Your Grace," her father greeted stiffly. "We did not expect—" "I don't make announcements when I hunt," the Alpha said. His voice was unlike any she'd heard. Rough and smooth, wild and sharp, laced with something that made her heart seize. "I was told this house held bloodline nobility," he continued. "One of old standing, loyal to the throne." "Of course," her mother answered. "We are ever faithful." There was a pause, the kind that makes the air taste like iron. "And yet something stinks beneath your floors," he said. Ilara's entire body tensed. The silence that followed was long. She imagined her father's clenched jaw, her mother's forced smile. "An old wine cellar," her father lied. "Sealed for years." The Alpha said nothing for a moment. Then came the sound of movement, slow, deliberate footsteps across the floor, closer to the trapdoor. "Strange," he murmured, "because my wolf stirs when I stand above it." Ilara covered her mouth with both hands. She felt him, right above her, as if the weight of his presence pressed through stone. The wolf inside her chest, long dormant, gave a quiet shudder. "You keep secrets here," he said, more to the room than to them, "and secrets, I've learned, always bleed." She heard her mother's breath hitch. Then came the shuffle of parchment. "These are the names of families I will visit," the Alpha said, stepping away. "Each will be tested for truth. Each shall be seen." The footsteps began to fade, slower now, as if his curiosity hadn't quite died. But then he stopped again. "One more thing," he said. "During the blood moon, no soul shall be hidden, not even the forgotten ones." And just like that, he was gone. The doors opened. The cold rushed in. Then silence returned, but it was different now, tainted by something alive. Ilara didn't move for a long time. Her heart raced. Her skin tingled. Her scars, for the first time in years, felt warm, like they remembered fire, not pain. Above her, the Alpha King had stood, and somehow, without knowing her name or face, he had sensed her. Something was changing, and for the first time Ilara no longer feared what came next. Ilara didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but anticipation. The air in the cellar buzzed with energy, like a storm about to break. Her ears replayed the Alpha King's voice over and over, each syllable scraping against the edges of her heart like flint to stone. He had felt her. He didn't know her name, hadn't seen her face, but something inside him stirred when he stood above her prison. That was more than chance. She paced the cellar, bare feet silent over stone, fingers brushing along the jagged walls. The iron chains that had once shackled her wrists still hung from the far post, long since rusted. Her father hadn't removed them, just in case. She stopped in front of them, staring. The cuffs were too large now. She had grown since they last held her, grown without sunlight, without a future, without love. But not without strength, and now he was here. The Alpha King. Kale, she whispered the name she'd only heard in stories. Kale of the Northern Claw. A king without mercy, a wolf who walked like a man, a ruler who bowed to no one. Yet he had stood in her home, above her head, speaking truths her parents had buried for years. Above, the manor moved like a hive of anxious bees. Doors slammed. Voices hissed behind closed rooms. Her mother had argued with her father again. "We should move her," her mother had said, "before he returns." "There's nowhere else," her father snapped. "And if he suspects—" "He already suspects," she cried. "You saw how he looked at the floor. He knew." Ilara pressed closer to the ceiling, catching every word through the cracks. "I won't have him sniffing around our secrets," her father muttered. "The cellar stays sealed, and she stays forgotten." A pause, then quieter. "If she makes a sound, you know what must be done." Ilara's breath caught. She stepped back, heart pounding. The chains, the cuffs, the silence they demanded. But something inside her rebelled. No more. That night, while the manor slept under the false peace of locked doors, Ilara knelt beside the iron grate in the far corner, the only link to the outside world. Cold air drifted in. It smelled of pine and something wilder. Wolves. She closed her eyes and let the scent wash over her. She didn't know what she was doing, only that her body moved as if remembering something ancient. She whispered into the grate, not words but feeling, a cry, a plea, a spark of who she truly was. Far off, a howl rose in response. Not distant this time, close, closer than it should have been. Ilara's eyes flew open. Someone was coming. Above, a floorboard creaked. A shadow passed across the light filtering through the grate. Then came a voice, low, feral, familiar. "Who's down there?" She held her breath. "Who are you?" he asked again, voice harder now. She stepped into the faint light and whispered, "My name is Ilara." The silence that followed was thunderous. Then a pause, a growl, not of anger, but recognition, and a promise. "I'll be back," he said. And just like that, he was gone. But the chains, still hanging, still waiting, seemed weaker now. Not just with rust, but with doubt. She looked at them and whispered, "Not for much longer." The night held its breath. Above her the manor stood quiet, cloaked in uneasy sleep. But Ilara could feel it. Something had shifted. The air was sharper, crackling with an unseen force. Her skin tingled. Her heartbeat kept time with the wind outside, wild and unpredictable. He had spoken to her. Kyle. The Alpha King. His voice still echoed in her chest, low and rough with command, but beneath that something gentler. Recognition. She hadn't imagined it. He had heard her, seen her, and he had promised to return. She crouched near the grate again, watching the moonlight filter in through the slats. Frost kissed the edges of the opening, and the scent of pine and cold earth curled in on every breath. Somewhere in that darkness, he was moving. She could feel him drawing nearer. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked above. Not slow, deliberate steps like before. These were quick, heavy, urgent. Her father's voice rose in a sharp whisper. "Did you hear that?" Then her mother, trembling, "He's back. I told you we should have moved her." "Shut up!" A crash. The front doors slammed open, boots on stone. This time, no introduction, no formalities, just presence. Kyle didn't speak. He didn't have to. "Alpha," her father began, voice stretched thin. "This is highly inappropriate." "Move," Kyle growled. Something hit the wall. A grunt. Her father may be thrown aside. "Where is she?" he demanded. "There's no one." "You lied." Another crash. The sound of splintering wood, and then the trapdoor above her rattled. Her breath caught. It had never opened, not in years. Her fingers gripped the floor as the old hinges groaned. Dust rained down from above. Moonlight pierced the dark, and then a figure descended, tall, broad. Power wrapped in flesh and bone. His eyes caught hers immediately, golden, glowing faintly, piercing through every wall she'd ever built. Kyle. She rose slowly, unsure if her legs would hold. He looked at her, not with pity, not with horror, but with something ancient and fierce. "Ilara," he said. Her name in his voice sounded like something sacred. She said nothing. Her throat burned with emotion too large to speak. His gaze swept over the cellar, the chains, the stone, her bare feet on the cold floor. Then his hands, large, calloused, reached for the iron cuffs. He gripped them, pulled. Nothing happened. He narrowed his eyes, teeth gritting. The metal resisted. "Enchanted," he muttered. "Cowards." And then Cale did something no one had ever done for her. He growled, not as a man, but as something more. His shoulders trembled, bones shifting beneath skin. Gold light shimmered in his veins. His voice deepened to a sound not meant for human throats. He wrenched the chains again, and they shattered. Ilara stumbled back, breath caught, as the broken links clattered to the floor. Kyle stood straight, panting slightly, glowing with residual power. He looked at her again. "You were never meant to be caged." Her voice finally returned, cracked and soft. "Why did you come?" He stepped closer, lowering his head slightly. "Because my wolf woke the moment I stood above you." She didn't understand, but her heart did, and it beat a single word: free. Kyle didn't speak again, not at first. He simply looked at her. Ilara had never been studied like this before, not with cruelty, not with curiosity, but with something raw, searching. His golden eyes weren't human in the way they pierced through her silence. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, pouring through the cellar grate like twin flames. She turned her face away, instinctively hiding the left side, where her scars twisted from temple to jaw like a memory burned into flesh. But he didn't flinch, didn't ask. "Look at me," he said softly. She hesitated, then met his gaze. For a long, stretching moment, neither moved. The air between them seemed to hold weight. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. Cale stepped closer, but not too close. Close enough for her to feel the heat radiating off him, the scent of pine and something wilder clinging to his skin. "I smelled fear," he said. "Pain, shame, and something else." Ilara's voice cracked. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but my wolf does." She blinked. "What does that mean?" He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. "It means you're not what they said you were." Ilara swallowed, her throat dry. "They said I was cursed." "They lied." His voice was firm, no hesitation. She took a small step back. "Then why lock me away?" "Because they were afraid of you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Of a scarred girl." Kyle's jaw clenched. He closed the distance slowly, then crouched before the broken chains. He picked up a rusted link, turning it between his fingers like a relic. "They shackled what they didn't understand," he murmured, "and they sealed you underground like some buried truth." Ilara couldn't breathe for a moment. When he looked up again, the beast in his eyes had quieted but not vanished. It lingered behind every word, every motion. "You're not weak," he said. "And you're not broken." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands trembled at her sides. The words, she didn't know how to believe them. Kyle rose to his full height. Even in the dim cellar, he felt vast, like the night itself had taken form. "I didn't come here to pity you," he said. "I came because something called me, a pull I couldn't ignore. And it led me to you." Ilara stepped back again, unsure whether to run or stay rooted. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why me?" Kyle studied her, eyes narrowing. "Because the moon remembers, even when everyone else forgets." The silence that followed was deep, sacred. Then from far above a voice shouted, "Alpha!" He stiffened, his head turned slightly toward the noise, alert, assessing. But his focus snapped right back to her. "Are you ready to leave?" he asked. Ilara stared at him. Her heart pounded. The chains lay shattered on the floor. Her prison was open. Freedom stood before her in the form of a king with eyes like fire, but she didn't move. "I don't know how," she admitted. Kyle extended his hand. "Then I'll show you." The forest was darker than she remembered. Each tree stood like a silent sentinel, branches clawing at the sky, their leaves trembling with secrets. Ilara clutched her borrowed cloak tighter around her shoulders, the thick fabric still carrying Kale's scent, pine, leather, and the faintest trace of something wild. She followed him wordlessly through the woods, stepping where he stepped, keeping her eyes on the back of his broad figure. He moved with impossible grace for someone so large, like the earth molded itself to let him pass. Her legs ached, her breath was shallow, but she said nothing. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear no longer held her captive. Curiosity did. They crossed a shallow stream. Its surface shimmered with moonlight, casting their reflections in broken silver. Ilara glanced down and barely recognized herself, mud-streaked, pale, eyes wide with something unfamiliar. Freedom. Kyle stopped just beyond the water. "We're close," she looked up. "Where are you taking me?" He turned his head, golden eyes catching the moonlight again. "To my pack." A tremor went through her. "I don't belong there," she said quickly. "I'm not like you." "You don't know what you are yet," Kyle replied. They continued in silence until the trees thinned and the land opened into a wide clearing. Ilara gasped softly. Dozens of wolves stood in the open space, each one massive, their coats glistening beneath the full moon. Some shifted as she watched, bones snapping, bodies reshaping until men and women stood in their place, cloaked and fierce. They all turned to look at her. Ilara froze. Kyle stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "This is Ilara." The air shifted. One of the women stepped forward, tall and strong, her dark braid falling over one shoulder. "She's human." "She's more," Kyle said. The woman narrowed her eyes. "You bring a stranger during blood moon." "She is not a stranger," Kyle said, voice firm. "She is marked." Murmurs spread through the clearing. Ilara wanted to run. Every instinct screamed that she didn't belong, that these people, these wolves, would never accept someone like her, scarred, small, human. But Kyle stood beside her like a shield. "She was locked away," he continued, "not because she was weak, but because they feared her strength." A younger man stepped forward. His eyes were sharp, his stance defiant. "And you just trust her? Because your wolf twitched?" Kyle didn't blink. "My wolf doesn't twitch. It chooses." Silence fell again. Ilara's fingers trembled at her sides. She took one step forward, then another. "I didn't ask for this," she said, voice soft but clear. "I don't know what I am, but I know what I'm not. I'm not a prisoner anymore." Some of the wolves watched her with suspicion, others with curiosity, but no one turned away. The woman with the braid finally spoke. "If she's to stay, she must prove herself." "She will," Kyle answered. Ilara didn't move, but something inside her settled. Not peace, not yet, but purpose, and far above them the blood moon watched. The forest was alive with whispers. The blood moon hung low in the sky, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made Ilara's skin prickle and her instincts scream. She stood at the edge of the circle, barefoot on the cold ground, surrounded by wolves, some in fur, some in flesh, all watching, waiting. Kyle stood beside her, silent, his expression unreadable. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He looked down at her, gold eyes calm but unflinching. "Now, we find out what lives inside you." Ilara swallowed hard. "And if there's nothing?" "There's something," he said simply, "but it must be called." The braided woman from before, Naera, Kyle had named her, stepped into the center. She held a silver dagger in one hand, its blade glinting under the moonlight. "Blood calls the wolf," she said. "No shift begins without sacrifice." Ilara flinched. "I'm not ready." "You never will be," Naera replied. That's why it must be done now. Kyle didn't move to stop it, he only nodded. Ilara's heart pounded as she stepped forward. The circle tightened. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, every breath held in waiting. Naera offered the blade. Ilara stared at it. She thought of the cellar, the chains, the silence, the way her parents looked at her like she was a burden to be hidden. Then she thought of Kale, of his hand breaking iron, of his voice saying her name like it meant something. She reached out and took the blade. Her hand trembled, but she didn't hesitate. With a quick breath, she dragged the tip across her palm, the sting sharp and immediate. Blood welled up dark and warm. The forest seemed to inhale. The wolves lifted their heads. One by one, they began to howl. Ilara dropped the blade. Heat surged through her body. She stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her blood felt like fire in her veins. Her bones ached, twisted, stretched. Something ancient inside her clawed to the surface. She gasped, falling to her knees. Her vision blurred. Her skin burned. Her breath came in ragged pulls. Kyle moved to her, but Naera held him back. She has to do this alone. Ilara cried out, pain rippling through her like waves. Her fingers dug into the dirt. She felt her spine shift, her jaw stretch, her nails thicken. It was all too much, too fast, too violent. And then, silence. Everything stopped. She collapsed, panting. No fur, no claws, no change. Just Ilara. The murmurs started immediately. She didn't shift. She's not one of us. She failed. Ilara's hands shook. Her body felt broken, hollow. She couldn't lift her head. Kyle knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her back. "You're not done," he said quietly. "But you're not done." She looked up at him. His expression wasn't disappointment. It was certainty. And as the circle began to break, the wolves dispersing, Ilara swore the blood moon flickered, just once, like it too was waiting. The failure hung over Ilara like a storm cloud. Days had passed since the blood moon ceremony, and though her wounds had closed, the whispers hadn't. The wolves had seen her bleed, scream, collapse, and nothing more. No shift, no fur, no howl, only silence. She trained alone in the mornings now, just outside the camp's perimeter. Naera had assigned her to basic drills, balance, speed, strength, but there was no warmth in her gaze, only scrutiny. "You're too soft," she said one morning, tossing Ilara a wooden staff. "If you can't shift, you fight harder or you die." Ilara caught the staff, jaw tight. "I'm not giving up." "Good," Naera said. "Because no one here will carry you." Every blow she blocked sent shocks through her arms. Every stumble earned her a glare, but she got up, every time, and Kyle watched, always at a distance, always silent, until the challenger arrived. He came at dusk, tall, broad, wrapped in a black cloak stitched with the sigils of the Hollow Fang clan. His wolf stalked behind him, lean and silver-eyed, its fur darker than night. The camp froze at the sight of him. Kyle stepped forward, posture unshaken. "Dareth." The man's mouth curved into a slow smile. "Alpha Kyle, or should I say, former Alpha." Gasps echoed through the circle. Wolves shifted uneasily. "I still wear the mark," Kyle said calmly. "And I still command this ground." Dareth's gaze swept the clearing. "A king who keeps a human in his ranks. The prophecy spoke of a queen with fire in her blood, not fear in her spine." His eyes landed on Ilara. "This is the one you've chosen?" She stared back, refusing to look away. "She didn't even shift," Dareth sneered. The blood moon passed and nothing awakened. "She isn't finished," Kyle replied, stepping between them. Dareth's wolf snarled, echoing his master's contempt. "I challenge you," Dareth said, "not just for the crown, but for the future of our kind. You've grown soft, Kyle, tamed by a girl who hasn't earned her place." A low growl rumbled in Kyle's chest. "Say another word about her, and you'll lose more than your title." Ilara felt heat rise in her face, a mix of shame and fury. Dareth turned to her. "If you're truly his queen, stand beside him in the circle." Ilara stepped forward, trembling. She didn't know if she was brave or just foolish, but she wouldn't hide. "I'm not his queen," she said, "but I am not afraid of you." The wind shifted. Cale's voice was steady. "If you want to challenge me, Dareth, we fight at moonrise." Dareth nodded. "And when I win, she leaves. Or dies." Then he turned, cloak snapping behind him as he disappeared into the forest. The camp buzzed with tension. Ilara looked at Cale. "I've put you in danger," she said. He met her eyes. "No. You've shown them what it means to fight for something." Ilara didn't reply. But that night, as the moon climbed higher, something inside her stirred. Not pain, not fear. Something deeper. Something ready to rise. Ilara sensed something was wrong before the first scream. The camp was too quiet that morning. The usual sounds, footsteps crunching through leaves, low chatter between scouts, the distant rustle of fur against earth, were absent. Even the birds had fallen silent. She emerged from her tent slowly, instincts prickling. The sky was overcast, a sheet of grey hanging low over the trees. Kyle was already gone. He had left before sunrise, preparing for the challenge that would determine his right to lead. She had watched him go, saying nothing. He hadn't needed words, just one look, and she'd felt it. This wasn't just a fight for power. It was a fight for her place at his side. Now the wind carried something foul, smoke. She turned just as the fire exploded through the far side of the clearing. Wolves scattered, shouting. Tents collapsed under the weight of flame and chaos. Figures moved through the trees, dark, fast, familiar. Too familiar. Ilara's heart stopped when she saw the family crest stitched onto one of the cloaks, her family. The banner of her house, black thorns on white silk, billowed as men rushed forward, torches in hand, steel drawn, not to conquer, but to seize. "Ilara!" a voice called out. She turned slowly, disbelief warping her features. Her mother stood at the edge of the clearing, untouched by ash, flanked by armored guards. "Come home, child," she said. "This place is not yours." Ilara's voice was ice. "You shouldn't be here." "We gave you time to recover," her mother continued. "Time to see reason. But you've been corrupted by beasts. It's time to be cleansed." Ilara backed away, rage boiling beneath her skin. "You locked me underground, you told the world I was cursed, and now you pretend to care." "You're not well," her mother said. "The wolves are using you. They only want your blood." A blade flashed to her left. She ducked just in time as one of the guards lunged. She rolled across the dirt, scrambled to her feet, and ran. Voices shouted behind her. "Ilara! Ilara, stop!" She didn't stop. She tore through the woods, heart hammering. Branches lashed her skin. Her breath burned in her lungs. Her thoughts raced. They'd come for her, not to save her, but to erase her. Something whistled through the air. Pain exploded in her side. An arrow. She crashed to the ground, gasping. Footsteps approached. She tried to rise, but her vision swam. Then a growl, low, terrifying. Kyle. He was there between her and the threat, fury radiating off him like heat. Blood coated his knuckles, his eyes glowed gold. "No one touches her," he snarled. The soldiers froze, but Ilara barely heard them. She was fading. The world tilted, blurred, cracked at the edges. And just before she lost consciousness, one thought pierced through the pain. They hadn't come to save her. They'd come to destroy what she was becoming. The darkness was different this time, not the familiar, suffocating black of the cellar. This darkness pulsed, alive and hot like molten stone. It curled around Ilara's limbs, clung to her lungs. Somewhere far away, she thought she heard her name being called. A voice, low, aching, and full of rage. "Kyle." She wanted to answer, but her mouth wouldn't move. Her body felt distant, unrecognizable. Then the fire came. It started in her chest, a slow burn at first, then growing, fierce, wild, all-consuming. Her back arched. She screamed, or thought she did. Pain split through her like lightning. Her bones twisted. Her muscles pulled tight. Her blood howled. She was breaking, or becoming. Images flashed through her mind. Kyle's eyes, the cellar's chains, the blood moon, her mother's cold smile. 1,000 moments, burning, tearing, merging. Then her heartbeat slowed, and everything exploded. She opened her eyes. The forest was gone. She stood alone in a vast silver field. The sky above shimmered with stars she'd never seen. The air was warm, buzzing with energy. She looked down at her hands. They were paws, white, glowing faintly. Her reflection shone in a pool nearby, a wolf, silver-eyed and ethereal, her scars glowing like lines of moonlight across her fur. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't broken. She was awake. The howl rose in her throat before she could think. It tore from her like truth, ringing through the strange place, shaking the stars. The sound vibrated through her soul. Then, light, blinding, cold, real. She blinked. She was back. The camp lay in ruins around her. Smoke drifted through the trees. Wolves stood frozen, mid-motion, their eyes wide, and in the center of it all, Cale, bloodied, wild, stood staring at her. "Ilara," he breathed. She stood on all fours, her body no longer hers but more than it had ever been. Her fur shimmered silver, her breath steamed in the air. Her eyes met his, and he dropped to one knee, not in defeat, in reverence. She stepped forward. Her movements were smooth, silent. Her pack, because now they were hers, parted for her without question. Nyera whispered something Ilara couldn't hear. Dareth, the challenger, stood at the edge of the clearing. His wolf lowered its head and backed away. "You shifted," he muttered. "But the moon—" Ilara's form shimmered, bending, cracking, until she stood on 2 feet again, bare, glowing, her skin laced with light. She looked at him and spoke, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "I don't need the moon to tell me who I am." Dareth said nothing. He simply turned and vanished into the trees. Kyle approached slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "You found it," he said. "I didn't," she replied, breathless. "It found me." And when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. The fire was gone, but the power remained. The earth beneath Ilara's feet felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because she had. She stood taller, grounded in her skin. The hum beneath her bones, the echo of the wolf, was constant now, like a second heartbeat guiding her steps. The others felt it too. They didn't need to speak it aloud. The way they looked at her had changed, not with pity, with respect. Kyle walked beside her, his presence steady but quiet. He hadn't spoken much since the shift, not because there was nothing to say, but because some moments needed silence to be honored. Ilara broke it gently. "You knew, didn't you?" He glanced at her. "I hoped." "I was terrified," she admitted. "And yet you didn't run." They approached the center of the camp where the elders gathered. Nyera was already waiting, arms crossed, face unreadable. The others stood in a wide circle, the fire between them burning bright. Kyle stepped forward. "The challenge has passed, the prophecy fulfilled." "Not yet," one of the elders said. His eyes were sharp, old as the mountains. "The prophecy spoke of a queen who would end the blood war. The war still looms." Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "Then I'll end it." Nyera raised an eyebrow. "You intend to unite the packs." "I intend to make sure no girl is ever locked away because of fear," Ilara said. "No wolf cast out for not shifting on time. No blood spilled for the sake of pride." Silence. Then, slowly, one of the younger wolves stepped forward. She dropped to one knee, then another and another, until the entire circle bowed their heads. Nyera didn't kneel, but she nodded once, sharp and final. "Alpha Queen," she said. Ilara exhaled. The words settled over her like armor, not heavy, but earned. Later, she stood with Cale on the ridge overlooking the valley. The wind carried the scent of pine and fire, of change. "You've always been their leader," he said. "They just didn't know it yet." She turned to him. "And you?" "I knew the moment I smelled your sorrow." She smiled faintly. "That's not a very romantic beginning." "I don't need romance," he said, stepping closer. "I need someone who won't flinch when the world breaks." He reached for her hand, and this time she took it without hesitation. "Then you have her," Ilara said. A howl rose in the distance, one of peace, not warning. It echoed across the trees, and others followed, a chorus swelling beneath the stars. Ilara closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding. She was seen, and not for what she'd suffered, but for what she'd become. The frost had begun to melt. In the days that followed Ilara's rise, the camp changed, the sharp edge of tension dulled. Wolves who had once eyed her with suspicion now nodded in quiet respect. Even Naira, ever stern, had begun addressing her without disdain. The Hollow Fang clan sent no word. No further threats came from Dareth or his allies. Rumors whispered through the valley that the challenger had retreated to the outer ridges, where the land grew cold and cruel. No one followed him, because no one needed to. Ilara had claimed more than just a title. She had claimed unity. At her command, messages were sent to the surrounding packs, an invitation, not a demand. A call to speak under truce, not threat. It was unheard of. No alpha before her had dared. And yet they came. One by one they entered the clearing, scarred, proud, uncertain. Packs that had feuded for generations now stood side by side, some too stunned to speak, others burning with curiosity. Ilara stood before them all, no crown on her head, no armor on her shoulders, just a deep red cloak, the color of dusk, flowing behind her like a promise. "You all know my name," she said, "but most of you know nothing about me." She let that settle. "I was locked away in darkness," she continued, "not because I was weak, but because I was different, because I scared the ones who claimed to protect me." A quiet murmur ran through the gathered wolves. "I don't offer peace because it's easy," she said. "I offer it because we're running out of time. Too many of us have buried sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. Too many wolves have died to prove who's stronger." Kyle stood behind her, arms crossed, silent, watching. Ilara took a slow breath. "Strength isn't measured by who you can kill. It's measured by who you can save." A wolf elder from the northern range stepped forward. His fur was graying, his limp visible. "And if we say no?" Ilara looked him in the eye. "Then I'll fight for peace without you. But I won't stop." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, to the shock of many, he knelt. Others followed. Not all, but enough. That night, a new fire burned at the heart of the camp. Bright, tall, unthreatened. Wolves from rival clans sat side by side, drinking, telling stories, laughing like they hadn't in years. Tension still flickered at the edges, but it no longer ruled. Kale found Ilara sitting near the edge of the circle, watching the flames. "They followed you," he said. "They followed the truth," she replied. "You are the truth now." She looked at him, eyes soft. "Then we better make it a good one." He reached down, offering his hand. She took it. Together they stood not as rulers, but as reminders that broken things don't stay broken forever. And peace, when born of pain, is stronger than war ever was. The stars were bright that night, brighter than Ilara had ever seen them, their light scattering like silver dust across the velvet sky. The moon was full again, not crimson now, but pure and glowing, casting its soft luminescence over the forest clearing. Children ran between the tents, laughing, their tiny footsteps echoing in the night air. Wolves lounged near the fires, some in fur, some in flesh, their posture relaxed, their voices warm. The tension that once clung to every tree had lifted. In its place, peace. Ilara sat on a smooth stone near the largest fire, her cloak pooled at her feet. The scar on her cheek shimmered faintly under the moonlight, no longer hidden, no longer hated. Around her the younger wolves gathered, eyes wide, ears perked, eager for a story. They always asked for this one. "Tell us again," a girl said, barely older than 10. "Tell us how you got your scars." Ilara smiled. "I got them saving someone I loved." "Were you afraid?" asked a boy with ash-blonde hair and 2 big eyes. "Yes," she answered truthfully, "but I did it anyway." Another boy chimed in. "Did it hurt?" "Yes," she said again, "but sometimes the things that hurt are the ones that change you the most. They leaned in closer, enchanted by the sound of her voice. She told them the story, not just of the fire or the chains or the cellar, but of the moon, of the shift, of the girl no one believed in who became something more. She didn't make herself the hero. She made truth the hero. When she finished, silence settled for a moment. Then one of the girls whispered, "I want to be like you." Ilara reached out and took the girl's hand. "You already are." From the edge of the circle, Kyle watched with quiet pride. When their eyes met, he nodded once. No need for words. They shared everything in glances now: joy, strength, history. Later, when the fire had dimmed and the children slept in bundled furs, Ilara stood with Kale at the edge of the woods. The wind was soft, stirring the treetops. Somewhere far off, a lone wolf howled, not in warning but in song. "I never thought I'd see this," she murmured. "You made this," Kyle said, "with your fire, with your scars." She looked up at the moon. "Do you think it remembers?" Kyle followed her gaze. "The moon always remembers." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a soft breath, "I used to believe my scars made me unworthy. They made you unforgettable." She turned to him, resting her hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her fingers. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she whispered, "when no one else did." He smiled. And as they stood there beneath the ancient sky, the fire of her past finally settled into something calm. This was not a story of chains. It was a story of the wolf who broke them. And if you believe in rising from the ashes, if you believe no one is too broken to matter, then follow this story and let the next one begin. The moon remembers. And now, so do you.